All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show. You one-stop shop for all things Commanders. It is draft week. Nobody grinds the draft harder than our friend Justin Mello from the Draft Network, who, if you keep up, knows who's going where with when. Justin, thank you so much for hopping on the show with us today.
So pleasure's all mine. Finally made it to draft week. I'm looking forward to seeing it all play out, and also looking forward to taking a nap at some point.
Absolutely.
Yes, naps have been well deserved. George, Justin is on limited time because he's got a company meeting coming up at 11:30. Let's go ahead and fire up the mock draft machine because
Sure.
I wanted to take another look at this thing. Justin, the layout on this
Sharp.
is so super sharp, so we want to be able to play around with it a little bit. While George gets this set up here, how many prospects have you interviewed so far in the process?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, guys. A lot of work went into the mock draft machine. We're so thrilled with the way that it looks. Shout out, CEO Paige DeMacos, Director of Scouting, Keith Sanchez, who won a championship at LSU. He really put a lot of work into this and the prospect rankings and making this thing as realistic as possible. And also Jamie Eisner, our CEO, who was, so important to getting this done on time here. And in terms of the interviews, this morning, actually, you asked me at a good time. I just published my 200th, number 200, published this morning.
Wow.
Really excited about that. I think I told my editor, we're running them through Saturday because I've just got so many that I ideally I like to get them out on Wednesday this time of year at the latest, but I've got too many. So we're running them through Saturday, probably going to end up at around 220.
Just incredible. All right, let's kick this thing off here, George.
All right, sounds good.
We're looking at Commanders coming up at 29. Have you noticed anything interesting in the visits that you've seen the Commanders host, whether in person or virtually? Anything stick out to you, Justin?
Yeah, I think I would say that relatively they're looking for help at the positions that I think we expect them to be looking at help for, right? They've got a defensive-minded head coach in Dan Quinn, and I think they need a bit more on the defensive line there, specifically at edge. I think they're good, but not spectacular, is kind of how I'd put it. They've got a lot of really solid football players, but I don't know that there's a true difference maker in there anymore. The guy Montez Sweat, no longer the case. Chase Young, like all the guys they thought were going to be there for a long time. There's been a lot of turnover, at those spots. So I think defensive linemen, the noise at running back, I would say has been particularly interesting. Really, I think, you guys would probably attest to that, but quite a bit of connection to the running back spot. And look, when you've got a quarterback like Jaden Daniels, you're always looking at dynamic talent around him.
Absolutely. All right, so Justin, we're on the board right here. We're looking at a bunch of different prospects. As you kind of alluded to, I think Edge would definitely be a player of interest for Washington. Running back is definitely one. From a lot of your interview reports, it seems like Washington might potentially wait for a running back later on because it seems like they're more of like a, third, fourth round prospects there.
Sorry, quickly, George. You might want to pause the draft at the top so your pick doesn't.
I did. I did. Yeah.
Oh, you did. Okay,
yeah.
Just making sure. Yeah.
This board's slick. We use it a couple times. I love it. It's a gorgeous board. Very beautiful interface. So we're looking up here. Yeah. So going back to that. Yeah. So running back, that's definitely an option, but I feel like it might be more of a later option from the interviews you've talked about. But this is the big board right here. So I'll maybe kind of touch about like what you're thinking at Washington. Malachi Starks is on the top of the board. I'll show you our team needs: edge, wide receiver, running back, cornerback potentially. We're starting to hear about Carson Schwetzinger over the past couple of days being linked to Washington as well. What are your thoughts if you're the GM?
I just feel like they're going to go with an edge here. Historically speaking, if you want to narrow in on the edge group for me, historically speaking, you don't find, high-level contributors late at edge, right? It's got to be top 2 round picks. With them picking as late as they are, by the time they come around again, this is a deep edge class, but there's going to be a lot of talent, I would say, off the board at that point. So I think they're going to prioritize the edge spot. A guy like Donovan Ezaraku, who had 16 and a half sacks this past year, second most in the FBS. What an incredible talent. I look at a guy like Nick Scorton, who I think is going to really appeal to someone like Dan Quinn, bigger body type, played at about 280. this past season, and can really, stop the run at a high level, 3-down skill set. But I think if, with Ezeraku here, I'd probably go in that direction. I think that's something they'd strongly consider here.
I feel like Ezeraku is a home run pick for Washington because he kind of offers everything. I think who do we have on the other day, Doug? Like yesterday, we had Thor on Saturday. And we talked about how Washington wants to have a two-way player at the edge position. And I feel like Donovan Ezeraku kind of offers that. He's very technical with his pass rush, but also does offer some run support there. I'll pull the trigger on Ezeraku, but my next question would be Mikael Williams. People really like him. He's kind of been going up and down the board. Do you think he's going to be around in the 20s, or do you think he'll probably – we saw top 10 today by Jason Reed. What are your thoughts on him going up and down the board?
Yeah, that's tough. I think there's a chance he's around in the early 20s, but I don't think he makes it to Washington. I think the floor for him is probably Green Bay. I think if he's still there on the board when Green Bay picks, they've taken a lot of Georgia guys over the years. That the GM there loves investing in the trenches and keeping the cupboard full, if you will. I think if he makes it there, he'll be a Green Bay Packer. And if he doesn't, if he goes a little earlier than that, I think, the Saints would consider him at 9, the Jets as early as 7. Like, really depends on how they feel about his potential. Heck, the Seattle Seahawks, they need an interior lineman in the worst way. But I think he's a John Schneider kind of guy. I think they'd strongly consider him at 18. So there are a couple good teams in like that 8 to 18 range that I think would be a great fit for him.
Got it.
Well, the fan base certainly will be happy with Ezeraku, who has quickly become a fan favorite for this spot here at 29.
Yeah, he's a good football player.
When you think about setting up these boards,
actually, one second. I'm sorry. I paused it at 28, and the Lions took Ezeraku. So sorry about that. So now we're back on the board again. So now we can take a look at whatever you like. Sorry about that, guys. So
no, it's all good. Like I said, a Nick Scorton, I think a Malachi Starks, that's great value there, would kind of come in and play a versatile role. The interview I had, by the way, Malachi Starks, published this morning, so good timing on that one.
Okay.
Talking about teams seeing him potentially play boundary corner. So really versatile chess piece player, certainly someone Dan Quinn would like.
Did he mention talking to Washington by any chance, or was that part of the conversation?
He was deciding to keep those visits private. Yeah, he didn't want to disclose, especially a week of the draft. People tend to get a little bit more tight-lipped about those things. But, really outstanding football player.
All right, so pull the trigger on him.
Well, as the guest GM, it's still your pick here on the board. So do we just pivot to Nick to Scorton here, or you think Starks adds more value?
I think Starks adds more value. High-end guy. I've got a first-round grade on him, and I could see him being available this late. I think teams are overthinking the evaluation on him.
What is that evaluation? Just that he wasn't quite as productive from a numbers wise in this final season compared to the one before it?
That's part of it. Yes. I thought, the numbers in the film was a bit better in 2023 than it was in 2024. Thought they had a better team around him too. I think we've got to consider that, but that is the evaluation. And then also with safety being a non-premium, and then you've got the South Carolina kid, Nick Amaniori has kind of come up the board and is really pushing him for the safety one role. I don't think I don't know if this is a bold prediction or not, but I don't think we're going to see 2 safeties on Thursday, excuse me. At least one of those guys is going to slip into round 2.
Wow.
When the league thinks about Nick Amaniori, do they worry that his floor is like Isaiah Simmons?
I think what I keep hearing, and I was in agreement with a couple scouts that I spoke with, I'm not convinced that the tape matched the athletic testing. Right. The combine, it looked great for him. I was thrilled for him, but I didn't get that same vibe on tape that I did at the combine. So for me, it's a bit of a projection question there.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, so we're back on the board again. We picked Malachi Starks as the best available on the left-hand side. There is Carson Schwarzenegger there. There's Quinshon Judkins, which I find really interesting. Let's take a look at else. It's funny Jeffrey Boss is so high up on this board because he's like so much lower on all the other boards. It's interesting how that works out.
I'll tell you, I think we're going to be the ones that are a bit more accurate on that one. We'll find out this weekend, but I've heard good stuff about Boss. I got a scout who told me top 64 grade for sure.
Wow, okay. Can you talk to me about Schlesinger? He's kind of getting a lot of steam over the past couple of days. What's going on with him?
Yeah, sideline to sideline, explosive athlete, a bit undersized when it comes to disengaging off blocks, but the numbers were insane this year. The statistics, the testing was really impressive. I see a 3-down backer. I lean that he doesn't go in the first round, but I do think he's got a shot to get into the back half there. But, pretty clear consensus that he's the second best off-ball linebacker in this class.
Got it.
What edges do we have left at this point, George?
Yeah, that's where I was about to go, because I don't think there's any chance in hell that Dan Quinn's getting out of the second round without taking an edge. So you know what? I'm gonna make a sleeper pick here. You guys are gonna be surprised by it.
Love it.
But R.J. Oben out of Notre Dame has had some top 64 buzz, and I think that's the guy that Dan Quinn would really like. I thought he was great at the Senior Bowl, a little bit underrated in Mobile. Great size for the position, 3-down ability, stops the run at a high level. Think he's got some untapped potential as a pass rusher. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they went in, especially if they didn't get their guy at the top of the first like we didn't. I wouldn't be surprised if they went in this direction here.
Interesting.
That's why I love having these different guests on every day.
Yes.
We talk about it all the time. We've had probably 10, 15 drafts. We haven't heard of R.J. Oben yet, so I'm really interested by that.
Yeah, I'll go back and check him out.
Yeah. And then
just out of curiosity, George, what corners are left?
All right, give me 1 second. Justin, we've done this exercise quite often now, and it seems that if you don't take an edge in the first round, you're kind of shit for luck. To be honest with you, do you agree with that, or do you think it's I don't know? What are your thoughts?
It's a deep enough class where there's going to be some talent available in the second round, maybe a little bit left over in the third. But like I always say, it's a premium position. There are 3 positions that could go number 1 overall in any given draft. One of them is edge rusher for a reason. The other is quarterback. The other is offensive tackle, right?
Yeah.
Edge rusher, it's such a premium spot. And you look around the league, Max Crosby's are unicorns. Guys that produce at a high level are top 50 picks. And more often than not, they're top 20 picks, right? So it's one of those spots that you just have to address early. Teams rarely miss at edge. You're not going to get high-end guys 4th, 5th round. Just doesn't happen.
All right, so we're back on the board again. I paused the draft. So we could go R.J. Oben, as you kind of alluded to. We could go wide receiver, running back, wherever you want to go. But if you want to have that sleeper pick with R.J. Oben, we can do that as well, whatever you feel comfortable with.
I am going R.J. Oben. I think this is something Washington would consider here if they don't address edge in the first. I know Commanders fans probably watching saying it's a bit of a surprise. You gotta brace yourselves for realism too a little bit. I think R.J. Oben's got a shot to go earlier than the general public realizes.
Interesting. It always happens every single draft on a Thursday night. You just watch on the board, what the hell just happened? It's always something that pops out. It's funny.
Thursday and Friday, right? You're going to see it on both nights.
Yeah.
But at 260, I do think he's got the archetype of what they are looking for. That an edge setter. I think who was it that was on the other day and told us there's a reason why Cullen Farrell's still on the team and Dante Fowler's not. The sack numbers were nice for Fowler last year, but he couldn't set the edge, and it just destroyed them by the time they got to the playoffs. He was unplayable in that last playoff game.
Yeah, I mean, Dan Quinn's got a type, like you said, right? And it's very much the type of a defensive first head coach, right? He wants long, big, strong, and 3 down, right? He knows the importance. I mean, he was in Seattle he knows the importance of stopping the run on early downs, and rushing the passer is a privilege. It's not a right? And you got to stop the run on first and second down in order to get yourself into those situations. And he likes players that gets his defense into those situations.
If this team goes into the regular season, Justin, with Terry McLaurin, Brown, and Debo, is that enough, or does that room scare you a little bit?
I do. It's funny. It's like you're reading my mind. I do want to probably go wide receiver with this next pick because, I know the Debo swing is a big one and good for them. But with the injury history there, and it makes sense to take a risk like that when you've got a franchise quarterback on a rookie contract. But given the injury history there, I'm not super comfortable. I thought we didn't see enough from McCaffrey as a rookie, right? We're not overly reliant on that. They moved on from a couple guys, right, this offseason. I don't think Jamison Crowder is there anymore. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
He's a free agent, yeah.
Yeah, did they bring back Diami Brown?
No, he's gone to Jacksonville.
Yeah, he got a big deal, 1 year, $10 million, which absolutely stunned me, if I recall correctly now. I didn't think he was worth $10 million.
No.
But they lost a couple of those contributors. McCaffrey hasn't shown enough yet. They've got to do something else there, and it's got to be a rookie, right? They've got the money tied up where they've got it. They've got a veteran guy in Debo that they're rolling the dice on. I think they need to bring another young guy in here. So if you want to shift us over to wide receivers here, George, That's the direction I'll be going in here. Wow, look at Daniel Jackson high up there. I'm really intrigued by Daniel Jackson. I think he's one of my favorite sleepers in this class. Better route runner than he gets credit for. Had some good production at Minnesota. Underrated player, but that's not where I'm going to go with a guy that I'm high on that I think deserves more love and credit than he's getting. That's Torrey Horton. They're out of Colorado State. I thought Torrey Horton, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons in 2022 and 2023, gets injured this past year, unfortunately, doesn't get to put up those numbers. If he was healthy, he would have had 3 straight 1,000-yard campaigns. Well, he recovers in time for the combine. What did he run? Like 4.4, 4.41? I think it was low 4.4s for sure. Getting lost in the mix of a fairly deep class. Again, the injuries hurting him a little bit. I'm a big fan on Torrey Horton. I think he's going to be a steal for a team on the early portion of day 3. Let's go Torrey Horton here.
And he also has a punt return ability as well, which I think we need a little spark there, which I think it's good. And we actually about a month ago, it's funny, when we first started getting into Torrey Horton. I'm not sure if you guys, if you're familiar with Logan Paulsey, he's a former Redskin player for our team. He was on our draft board. He's like, hey guys, don't be surprised about Torrey Horton. He's, he got some upside ability. He could be a true X in his opinion. So it was interesting. So
yeah, he's just a really good football player, and I think he deserves more attention than he's currently getting, in my opinion. But he's going to be a steal for a good, smart organization.
Daniel Harms was on last week. He deserves a lot of credit for these write-ups. The extensiveness and the sheer volume of write-ups he did for this thing is incredible.
Yeah, he was awesome.
We've got our scouting team, really proud of the team we have. Again, Keith Sanchez is our lead scout, won a championship at LSU, as I said, was on that coaching staff for that perfect team. And then we brought in guys like Daniel Harms and Ryan Fowler, who you said you're going to have Ryan on later this week. You had Harms on. We appreciate the support. Those guys are both phenomenal. Harms writes a scouting report as good as any I've ever seen. And Fowler, if Fowler will talk your ear off when you have him on later this week, he's going to tell you about some prediction. He'll tell you about some D3 kid that's ranked, number 500 on an NFL big board. Fowler just, he eats, sleeps, breathes college football.
Yeah, we've had him on a couple of times.
Yeah, I've known Fowler for a long time. You guys got a good crew on there, and the crew's always been really good to us. So we try to do the same in return.
Absolutely.
No, we appreciate it. Interesting when the Washington Commanders come up here on this next pick. I think it's very clear, and it's an interesting dilemma that they have to face. We went with the value pick, in the first round with Malachi Starks, and I think I would love what he could do in that secondary. But now we find ourselves in a spot here where we know, they've been looking at running backs. But I'm also, for me personally, and they may not agree with me, but I'm a little more concerned about the state of corner than I am running back personally.
We wholeheartedly agree with you.
I would like to see them address corner before they do running back. So with this next pick here, when we come up, I'll be looking at corner specifically because you've got to stop the pass, and you've got to do that in the NFC especially, right, if you want to get to a Super Bowl. And they're it was so much fun to watch how this team turned it around this past year. As just a neutral, I can't imagine how it felt like for you guys. It was just so much fun to see them go from, it really felt like 0 to hero, right? And it just, in Tennessee, they're hoping the same thing with Cam Ward here because it's obviously rare, but what an example Jaden Daniels was this year of just taking a team really from the pits of hell, in all honesty.
In all aspects.
Attention.
Justin, with Cam goes 1 to the Titans, do they go receiver in the second round? Like we have seen teams do this in the past. Joe Burrow's the last one that kind of comes to mind where you pair them up pretty quickly for long-term success. What direction do you think that Tennessee goes in the second round?
Yeah, 35 overall. I'd almost bet my life savings it's going to be a receiver or an edge rusher because unfortunately they are terrible at both. And they need premium talent at both spots. They need 2 players at each position. Unfortunately, they're not going to address every hole they have in this draft. It's going to be a multi-year process, but it'll be receiver or edge at 35. Depends how the board falls. I think they would love a Luther Burden there. If the character checked out, I think they'd love Emeka Egbuka. Don't sleep on Kyle Williams. He's risen up draft boards. He played with Cam Ward at Washington State. So that's someone they're very high on. But edge rusher is also a huge need there. So it really depends on the better player at those 2 spots at 35.
Did they give any thought to not taking quarterback with pick 1?
I'll be as short as I can, but they did until the combine came around because going into the combine, I think they were fairly convinced that it wasn't going to be. Keep in mind, they hadn't met him yet. The formal interview at the combine was their first chance to sit down with him. They were blown away. As a 20-minute interview only. They loved him so much. They brought him in for his pre-draft visit before free agency opened. That was strategic. Are we going to get into the Sam Darnold sweepstakes? What are we doing at quarterback? Pre-draft visit really solidified it. That's when you spend the whole day with him. They were just blown away with his, more so his knowledge of playing quarterback. They were so impressed with what he did on the whiteboard. Then they go to the pro day. They go to the pro day. They go back to Nashville. A couple days later, they go back to Miami for a private workout. Their owner flew the private jet to Miami for the private work. I mean, that's how much she was intrigued to meet him because they were so impressed with him. So he just solidified it for them throughout the process.
There you go.
All right. Commanders back on the board.
Yeah, back on the board. Yeah, so we'll take a look at cornerback over here. Justin, we found that we're talking to Thor on Saturday. Right after the second round, there's a pretty sharp cliff from the quarterback falling from third, fourth, fifth. Maybe you might have a little under the radar quarterback you might see over here.
There is a sharp cliff, to be honest with you. There are a couple of guys that I like on the board. Bilal Kone's got developmental potential. Western Michigan was at the Senior Bowl. Tommy Hill's got great size, but he's pretty raw. One that I keep hearing about, I'll probably go with here is Jordan Hancock out of Ohio State. I've had scouts absolutely gush about him. Good size to play the boundary, as you can see there. Will meet some of the thresholds. They're not going to make who is the Mississippi State corner that was a little light in the pants? They're not Emmanuel Moore. They're not going to make that mistake again. I know it's a different regime, but this regime's got a different type. And I keep hearing good things about Jordan Hancock. Again, one of those guys that could go a little earlier than people realize, but when I look at this board, I see a lot of nickels. I see a guy like Robert Launderbeam, who I like, but he's a nickel. There are a couple others there. Elijah Huzzy as a nickel. I think if they want an outside guy, Jordan Hancock makes a lot of sense here.
All right, this is awesome. This is like a completely unorthodox board. It's like I'm gonna do some more draft research later on tonight. Take a look.
Once you get into the weeds of day 3, that's where teams win and lose the draft. In all honesty, right?
Absolutely.
The ones that could find good value on day 3 are the ones that get good value late. So Jordan Hancock, I think, would be that. And then with my next pick here, when we come up, I am going to be looking at running back finally. I know, again, this might go differently for Washington this coming weekend. I do think there's a chance that they address it earlier than I have. It seems really interesting. They're sniffing around these guys. And look, again, I don't blame them. When you've got a quarterback like Jaden Daniels and you've got a class that as deep at running back as this one is, you're going to come away with a good football player. And that's, early or late. I talked to an NFC scout the other day who told me you're going to get running backs in the 5th or 6th round this year. That would have been 3rd rounders last year. He actually thinks there's like a 3-round difference at running back from this draft to last year. So there's going to be good whether they address it early or late. They're going to get a good ball carrier that's going to come in and contribute in a rotation, because I think that's what they're going to have this year. It's going to be a bit of a rotation.
A couple good running backs on the board too. I don't want to leave the witness at all, but Ja'Cory Crosby Merritt, we're hearing a lot of connections from Arizona. Him connected to Commanders as well. Taj Brooks is a Red Raider, so is Cliff Kingsbury, and so is Anthony Lynn. So there is, and actually Wes Welker. There's a connection there as well from Texas Tech going into there. So there's definitely some options.
Yeah, I love those connections. I would probably go with the latter though. Sorry, the former. Ja'Cory out of Arizona. I keep hearing the same connections you guys have heard. I think it was us, myself, Ryan. Someone put out the Commanders' interest top 30 visit. I believe it was. They keep sniffing around. And you know what? Good football player, but really explosive in the open field. He was great at the Pro Day showcase as well.
All right, let's pull the trigger on it. And then, Justin, I know you have to get off pretty soon. My question for you is, do you have any wild predictions or anything you think is going to happen, day 1 of the draft? I feel like it's so unpredictable this year.
Yeah, before I hop off, they'll call BS on me, but I'm selling the QB stuff. I think we're only going to get 2 in the first round. I don't think you're going to see Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe. The other bold prediction, if you will, is the New England Patriots do something at 4 that people don't expect them to do. And I think people expect it to be a tackle, right? Will Campbell or the Missouri kid. Anything else, I think, would be a surprise. Having covered Mike Vrabel in Tennessee, I don't think he's going to have a short-armed guy play left tackle, and that's what Will Campbell is. So I don't, again, I could be wrong. Of course, that's the expectation, but I think it's going to be Ashton Ginty or Jalen Walker, the
Oh,
Georgia
wow.
rusher. That's one of my two bold predictions. Him having Derrick Henry in Tennessee, we know he loves to run the football. He's got a young quarterback. I think he'd love to take the pressure off Drake May a little bit. I also look at edge. They've done a couple things, but they were the worst team in the league last year at the edge rushing spot. I don't think they're going to see a tackle worth taking it for there. So it'll either be a Hall of Famer in Ginty. That's what I've had scouts say. He's a Hall of Famer, or it'll be an edge. That's again, I know everyone's expecting tackle, but that's my bold take at 4.
I like it.
Justin, you're the best, buddy. Thank you. Thank you for all the DMs and sharing all your information with us. It's been fantastic, and it's been a fun cycle, kind of hanging out with you the whole time. So, you do great work, and we appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Again, my pleasure. I like to keep you guys posted on what's happening with Washington. I know that's great for your content purposes as well. So, appreciate all the support, and I'm sure we'll do it again soon.
Yep,
absolutely.
All right. Have a good one, buddy.
Care, gentlemen.
All right, Justin. See you, man. Doug, we staying on? What are we going to do?
We can get off, George. You ended the stream, so we'd have to start a new one.
No, it's not. It's still on. But you can end it if you like.
Oh,
yeah.
What do you want to do? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, we can kind of talk about this for a second if you want. We can go on this. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on the board, Doug? What are you thinking over here?
Well, I'll say it again, George. We say this all the time, and I think it's the truth. Like, the beauty of doing this with so many different people that have so many, everybody. One of the nice things also is that we talk to people that do their own scouting, right? Like this guy isn't going off what some other guy said. This guy's going off. He interviewed the prospect himself,
Yeah, that's awesome.
He interviews
I love
an amazing amount of people. So, again, what we found is if you don't go D-end in round 1 and you really want one, you're going to chase them the rest of the time.
I agree, 100%.
The problem was, unless you're interested in Nick Scorton or James Pierce Jr., they literally came off the board 3 spots before you were there. I mean, look at who gets picked before us.
Let's take how many edges were going in the first round? 1, 2, 3, 4. If you want to count Campbell, we'll leave them off. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They have 8 different edge players coming off in the first round, which is wild. Which is high. Like I'm hearing 5 and 6, but that's definitely a lot. Look how far Mike Green fell. Wow, all the way down to Baltimore. I'll be home run pick for them. So that's interesting. But yeah, I agree. I feel like it's funny. There's definitely a lot of chatter in the fantasy draft world. People are talking about it. People really want to get like a Travion Henderson at 29, which I can see that as being intriguing. But I feel like reaching for a running back that early is gonna bite you in your butt later on. I feel like if you trade back and you get a potential additional second round pick, you can go that route. But I think edge is kind of the way to go in the first, unless there's someone screaming value. And I guess I'll throw this question to you, Doug. Do you think a Malachi Starks is screaming value at 29?
I do. And I think that the more, and now maybe this is just like cycle fatigue, right? Draft cycle fatigue. But the more and more we talk to Nick Emenwari people, he makes me nervous.
People
that we've had some of these guys that are tweeners before. I'm sure you've noticed I brought up Isaiah Simmons the last couple of weeks. He's not the only one. There were some of these other guys. You remember an OB Melon Fanwu that got drafted from the Cowboys? And what happened to him?
Jeremy Chin has the same athletic profile. That's the funny thing, Doug. I feel like people kind of get caught up in narratives a little bit. I'm glad you're bringing this up. Jeremy Chin, if you pull up his RAS score, very similar height, very similar broad jump, very similar 40. They're saying Emenwari is like an alien mutant because it's kind of the popular, sexy thing to do. We've seen these players before. We've seen a couple of these safeties come through here. If we really wanted a player like that, we should have just re-signed Jeremy Chin and not have to worry about getting Emenwari. In my opinion,
and he didn't make a lot of money, George, out in Vegas. I mean, they could have easily paid him whatever the 6 or 7 million, 8 million tops I think he got out there if he got that. So yeah, I think they should. So for the Emenwari crowd, to your point, they already had at least an Emenwari light. I think Malachi Starks. What was the old set it and forget it? Like that's to me that's Malachi Starks. You put him in the defense, you tell him what you want to do, and he wears the green dot for the rest of his career there. I mean, he was starting from day one at Georgia.
People were telling, yeah, he did. That's true. And Georgia's obviously they produce defenders, every single year. From what I'm gathering, and from what I'm reading, from what I've watched, Malachi Starks, you might know more because you watch Georgia every single week. But Malachi Starks is as prepared and as ready for the NFL as Brian Branch was. And if you remember, Brian Branch fell to the second round because of his, do we need a high value? Do we need a nickel safety hybrid? Where does he fit? Do we really value that position? And he's an immediate impact player for the Lions. I kind of see Malachi Starks that way. And I think, listening to Daniel Jeremiah, Bucky Brooks, all these big draft guys, I like what they've said where it's like with a first round pick, you don't have to hit a home run as long as you hit a double, right? If you hit a double, like if you get a good starting player that's going to be sit and forget it, as you kind of alluded to, and just have them in your team and have them get better as the year goes on, you're not going to be mad at that. So I can see Peters being like, hey, I can take this risky play. I can take a Nick Scorton and hopefully he'll drop 20 pounds and be a great edge rusher, or I can plug and play Malachi Starks and have a solid Mike Sanders still clone, additional awesome, character leader on my team instantly. So that's something there.
And he can actually get up into that true single high free safety and play that look and allow you to do the things with some of your other underneath guys that you weren't really able to do with Chin because Chin needed to play
in the
box. Right. I mean, he can give you that. Malachi can give you that. The other thing was they had him playing out of position last year for the benefit of the team.
Yeah,
and that's why it's always so hard to scout the Georgia defense, right? Because Kirby just goes in there and says, hey, we need you to play here. Is it your best position? No. Like, should Michael Williams have been playing the end in their 34? No, probably not. That's not what their guys going to do in the NFL. But that's what they needed him to do in Georgia. And so you just shut up and do it. You'll notice a lot of these guys. I mean, he didn't leave. He could have left. And he did. You can see guys like Jameis Dumas Johnson, who ended up in Kentucky. I'm sure would have loved the fact that he stayed at Georgia because he got lost in Kentucky. So why these guys do this?
I would never leave Georgia. I would never
catch the bag. But
Mikel Williams, I'm actually really intrigued by him. I was watching him the other day. The fact that he can play stand up, hand in the dirt, he can do that run protection, he can jolt offensive tackles back. I think he's an awesome pick. I would love to have him if he fell to 29, but I don't see him there. Let's do one more, Doug, and we can get out of here. Look at the second round. Do you see anything that kind of stands out to you? A direction you would go if you were Washington? What are your thoughts?
I probably would have gone. See, this is when you start chasing. I probably would have gone Trey Harris here and not RJ Oben.
I agree.
But I think that's because I don't know anything about RJ Oben. Like,
absolutely.
I go look after this and I'll say, my man Justin was on to something.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about him to see a guy like Trey Harris there and say, no, thank you.
So for me, I agree with you. I think for me, in a dream scenario, you're getting a starting edge rusher in the first round. In the second round, you're hoping a wide receiver or a cornerback falls, right? I feel like that's kind of where the plush and the value is going to be. But looking at this particular draft board, it wasn't falling that way. I mean, Trey Harris, I would have taken him because I want that big body wide receiver. And I think I do want to invest in like the wide receiver group moving forward. But I mean, Trey Amos, Maxwell Harrison, Benjamin Morrison, even like those are all people. Siobhan Revel, if those guys are around, I would not be upset by any means getting any one of them, right?
In a draft cycle where we have very limited funds as far as draft capital goes, George, go back to the other screen real quick.
Second round pick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you? It seems counterintuitive to everything that we're thinking about, but if they go Malachi Starks at 29, and you're sitting here at 62, like, would you think about giving up one of your sevenths this year if it could get you Landon Jackson or Siobhan Revel? Or, one of these guys that we're just going to barely miss out on. I know it's counterintuitive to give up picks, but if that's all it took, say, was one of those seventh and maybe next year seventh to get Femi Adedeju at 15 here, how closely would you think about that, knowing that those positions are washed by the time we get out of this round?
I would. I think I would potentially. I would move up, right? I know it sounds counterintuitive. I'm big on the draft selections. Like I'm glad that we got Marshawn Lattimore, Debo Samuel, Larry Tunsil. Those are good additions. But ultimately, you have to twist my arm to trade. Like, I like to keep all my draft. I want to get more draft capital. Is how George Carmi typically wants to build my team. That's how I go. But I think Adam Peters kind of showed that his strategy is attacking this year. And if you're going to attack, you might as well go all in, right? Kind of like how the Rams did a couple of years ago. You can always recover later. You can always trade back a fifth and get that 7th-round pick back. But if you really do like that Lennon Jackson, which I do think I think they like him, Doug. I think Lennon Jackson is really in the mix for them. Femi Oladejo is really in the mix for them. I think that I wouldn't be opposed to I wouldn't be opposed to going up and grabbing them, especially for a 7th-round pick. Let's grab this guy. Sean's on here asking us questions. See what we have over here. What's up, Sean? He said, would you feel getting Starks in the first gives you a little bit more flex on getting a quarterback high or no? I'll start off with you, Doug, because I know you're more of a Georgia guy.
Yeah, I mean, I heard Justin say that about kicking him outside, but I mean, to me, when you draft Malachi Starks, it's to play him at that free safety spot. It's also to be able to roll him into coverage. You can get, like, that was one of the things they were doing at Georgia last year. He was basically in the big dime last year instead of being like a free safety rover, or even the actual, you brought up Brian Branch, just the pure nickel spot.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. Getting Starks doesn't make me feel any better on what we were talking about earlier, George, as far as wanting, if they truly want to be able to get Mikey back inside, like, Starks doesn't help with your boundary corner at all. Yeah,
I see what you're saying. So I can see what Sean's saying too. I agree with both of you. I think Malachi Starks will help the overall DB group. You can potentially put him in nickel in certain situations, which would balance things out. But I think he also would still need to draft a project or another corner down the road to kind of fill out that room. And exactly because of what you're saying, Doug, we do have smaller corners right now. Like you said, they're still kind of small. Even Starks is pretty small too, from what I understand. He's not like a large,
he's not a huge guy.
He's like 6-foot guy or something. He's not gigantic. So you still want a boundary guy to basically be out there to kind of bump Sanders still in, which would be kind of which I think would be ideal, because I think Sanders still is a dog, right? You want him by the line, you want him attacking the running backs, you want him on the shifty wide receivers. So bumping him inside is the way to go there. So,
yeah, I mean, think if you got out of this draft with Siobhan Revel or Maxwell Hairston and a Malachi Starks. I mean, now you really have just completely flipped your secondary.
And I think,
the biggest problem to me with Mikey Sanders-Strill that we saw last year towards the end is teams are going to get to the point where they do what it takes to get him on an island. And that's, of course, that's what they should. I mean, in no world, I like Mike Sanders-Strill, but you don't want him guarding Malik Neighbors,
AJ Brown,
like every trip down the field. CeeDee Lamb. I mean, these are guys you're going to see twice a year. To me, you need bigger physical. Not that he doesn't sign up for the physical side, he does, but that is a tough ask to ask for anybody to cover some of those freaks one-on-one. But a guy that's already a little undersized in the process, everything can't be fixed in 1 year, but I really feel like getting an extra outside boundary corner is important, particularly if Marshawn Lattimore gets hurt next year, which
he's a complete wild.
I mean, that's just what he does. He's going to miss a couple games, right?
He's a complete wild card, right? If Marshawn Lattimore gets hurt, then we're definitely at a deficit. Like, I understand Jonathan Jones, he's a replacement level. He's a Noah Iguodala, Noah I type of player. He can come in there. He can put in some good effort. He can put in some good time. But I don't want him out there 4 games in a row kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? That's how I view him. He was stronger about 5-10 years ago for New England, but now he's a little bit older, kind of lost a little bit of a step. So I would love to have another corner in that mix. And let's say we go Malachi in the boundary corner, Doug. It might not be the blueprint that we imagined, but that would be awesome, right? We'd have a very strong secondary that would take away the pass, and we can manufacture the blitz. It might not be ideal, but sending Frankie Louvo out there, putting different defensive line packages out there to generate a pass rush, maybe just kind of explore that out. So,
cool. Yeah, being able to get yourself – there's two schools of thought: getting your defensive line a couple extra seconds to get home, which is what happens if you stack the secondary, or you have a D line that gets home so fast that the secondary doesn't have to hold quite as long. Either one works. When you get to the point where you can do both, then you're really rocking and rolling. But no, this was an interesting one. I got to go check out RJ Oben now.
Yeah, me too. All right, Doug, that was a good show, brother. I'll catch you on Wednesday. I guess Ryan Fowler.
Ryan Fowler on Wednesday.
All right, sounds good, brother. See you soon.
Cool, man.
Thanks for watching, guys. All right, peace.